Hello and welcome to AOK Games. We are here in the Blacksquare Velocity XL. This is the second time in this aircraft for me, primarily because Service Update 15 just came out. And I don't know if you've seen my other video on this aircraft review, possibly not, more than likely you haven't. However, in the end, on Final Approach, I noticed that the landing for this aircraft was very difficult to accomplish in a very smooth manner. So now, with 15 and the updated ground contact resolution increase and the model between the tires and the ground for the rollout and landing approach, it should be interesting to see how an aircraft like this fares, because prior it was commented by me that I thought that this was extremely difficult to control. So let me go outside real quick and I'll show you the aircraft, specifically because you can see the main landing gear. It's a 400 horsepower twin turbo engine with a rather large propeller for a composite aircraft, but it sits high off of the ground due to that propeller diameter there. So with the straight up main gear legs and that sharp turn inward, this aircraft, when it's light on fuel or in any kind of adverse wind conditions, poses, at least for me, a problem on landing. Otherwise, the aircraft is incredible, but it was difficult to land. So with 15 coming out, what I want to do is try to get this aircraft's feel down again, and I think that would be a great demonstration, because as this taxi out to the active is completed, I noticed that the turning is it's less twitchy. It's very connected feeling. And the reason we're here today in the Pacific Northwest is I like to review airplanes here at Sillets Bay, that's Sierra 45, is because you can see at the end of the runway threshold there is a wall of trees. Not only is that an occupational hazard for us, but essentially what it allows is once we take off, we get to experience the turbulence that that tree line and the thermals from the wind produce. Now, just so you know, I want to point out that we are indeed using live weather. So this is essentially an aircraft with no flaps, in live weather, with a tree line at the end, and the potential for a very interesting takeoff and landing, because when I reviewed this aircraft, it was a problem. So without cutting any corners here, I want to keep the video rolling so that we can get this takeoff. And right off of the bat, with 400 horsepower, I'm noticing the torque factor feels a lot less than it did before this update came out. And we'll go ahead and rotate. We are off. Plenty of power with 400 horsepower, and I'm looking for just over these trees. I want to experience this. And there's the turbulence, which again is another reason why I like to fly out of here when I'm reviewing aircraft, because rather than it being just a straight flat ground, it essentially gives me an idea of what's the flight model like when it actually is in real world conditions, at least depicted by the simulator, as opposed to just a flat level calm day with relatively decent humidity at sea level. So this obviously is a sea level airport, because that indeed is the Pacific Ocean, but we are going to keep it under the cloud layer here, and what I'd like to do is bring this airplane back in for a very quick unedited short final so that you can see what this aircraft can do with the new Service Update 15, which I believe will be significant. Based off of my previous review, I can say this was, for sure, one of the harder planes that I've ever experienced landing, short of course, the tail draggers, which I have purchased a numerous amount of. However, I've never reviewed them on the channel, because essentially the ground physics was so wonky on the takeoff roll and the landing that I couldn't in my right mind try to review an aircraft that, number one, I wasn't good landing with, and number two, would be difficult for the viewers to get a feel for by just watching a video. So that being said, this update kind of brings me to another point, that maybe now I can update this channel with a whole bunch of DLC aircraft that I've never been interested in reviewing prior to this release. So Another thing that's neat about this aircraft on final approach, and I say neat with the asterisk at the end of it, there are no flaps as previously mentioned on this plane, so we have to manage our altitude and our airspeed properly. But what's cool about that with flying in this real weather environment here is that despite the chop over the tree line, which is why we are taking off and then landing in the reverse direction, because this end of the runway threshold has those trees there, and that line is closer on this side to the runway than it is at the other end. So it gives me not only this chop we're experiencing here, but less time to pull off a successful landing without having to do a go around. And I think that that's important. That stress factor adds. Now, I can tell you right off of the bat that was exceptionally easy to accomplish in an aircraft that only has 50% fuel, is made of all composite material essentially, has extremely straight up and down vertically placed main landing gear, and they're very tall to begin with. On a live weather day with a light aircraft like this, I think it stands to say, in my opinion of course, that this 15 is a remarkable change. Now, I'm sure I'll get flack for this. However, I will say one of the new things that I'd like to bring to the channel was the content that I am attempting to try on X-Plane 12. This aircraft, at least with Sim Update 15, reminds me a lot of the X-Plane 12 ground handling physics, because I have to say, before this came out and the ground contact model was improved, I definitely think X-Plane 12 had for sure a better ground handling model. That's just my opinion, so take it for a grain of salt. However, I think using this light aircraft with this active weather, as you can see in the skies, it's a little less than polite outside, and it has made all the difference. This was an aircraft that was fun, and I highly recommended it, I think, in my review. And I just came in on that final approach, and it was like clockwork, really easy. But in the review, I mentioned essentially that it was an aircraft that was kind of hard to land, in my opinion. And it took a little bit of concentration and practice, because with a crosswind, it wasn't necessarily something that was easy to pull off. Now, I am definitely not a pro, but I for sure can feel a difference, as I'm sure all of you can as well. So, you know, all things considered, Service Update 15 is going to be a gem for us simmers out there. That being said, I'll go ahead and leave it here. And I think the aircraft itself, with its landing gear, I think it kind of states its case. Extremely bizarre how that looks. But when you have an engine that's swinging a big prop making 400 twin turbocharged horsepower, you kind of need to elevate the fuselage off the ground, do you not? That and the fact that there are, as previously mentioned, no flaps kind of makes this aircraft unique. However, as it's a Blacksquare product, it is indeed most certainly worth the effort, and it's easier now to fly than ever. So good things to come in the simulator, good things to come to the channel, and as such, thank you for joining me here at AOK Games. Until the next one, bye-bye.